Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started. So welcome to another episode of Science and Spirituality. We have another question asked that is really powerful, especially for the times right now. Been really looking forward to recording an episode to address what is happening in the world right now. If you're listening to the recording, you know that right now is March 20th while we're recording it, 2020. The coronavirus is going on. So the question is about anxiety and overthinking, because it's something a lot of people do. So the question is, what are the best ways to deal with anxiety and overthinking from a spiritual standpoint, especially when your mind is on a constant chatter? So Chris, I want you to bring up kind of like history. It's like, that was really good what you were beginning with.
Well, I was just like thinking in my head that like humans, we really like when things are under our control. Like we always want to try to control things. And when you think about like throughout history, like all of the human invention and all of like human progress has been getting more and more things under our control. Like I'm just like thinking right now, like first of all, it's like what's it called? What is it called when you like when you make a horse rideable?
Oh, that's a good question. I know what you're talking about.
Like getting tripped
Not
up
like
on the whip.
breaking it in. It's like domesticating. It's also not it. I know there's a specific term, but it's not it.
Well, that was like the first example I was thinking of. I was like, oh, like, you know, getting that under our control, like even like pets,
Yeah.
and then like driving, and then like we can predict the weather now. And it's like we live in such like a world now where we like things to be in our control. And so
now.
yeah, and right now, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so surrendering that control is difficult for a lot of people. And that's where like anxiety comes in, because anxiety is really just thinking about the future too much. It's having an anticipation about the future. And it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like you're in the middle of a rock and a hard place, because you want to control the future, but it's impossible to control the future because you don't know what the future brings. So I think like the spirituality comes in balancing that, where it's like you can do your best to prepare for the future, but then you also have to do your best to live in the now and make decisions in the now and then readjust as the next moment comes. Yeah.
And that's a whole thing I want to like loop back to about like trying to control the future, but we can create the future, but it's very different than what most people think as like visualizing and like, oh, out in the future. But like all of that like work, the visualizing, like the right thinking, the positive thinking, all that happens in the now, in the present moment.
Right.
You know, we'll talk about that later,
But you know, even just touching on that really quick, like the whole like the law of attraction kind of stuff, like building and creating your own future. Like you have an idea of what the future is going to be, but we always say that you have to surrender up how it's going to happen.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So you're really not controlling the future. You're just you're kind of giving, you know, your brain an idea of what you want, but then surrendering to how it comes to pass.
Yeah.
So there's always that.
You get structure in your mind, and that actually flows beautifully into the point I wanted to make. That's what I was saying. Like we'll cover all, you know, what we were just touching on later, but it's particularly surrender, because that's the answer. You know, how we deal with anxiety and overthinking is through surrender, and that's the spiritual side of it. Because as spiritual beings having a human experience, we can have anxiety and we can have overthinking, but we don't have to let it have us. Meaning that it can happen, but we don't have to attach ourselves to it and say, I am an anxious person or I am an overthinker. It's just an activity of the mind, and the mind is separate from our spirit. Our spirit is infinite, you know, and so like, you know, to connect with that, think of where were you before you were born, and where will you be after you pass away? Because if someone dies, someone passes away, we don't say, oh, like, you know, like let's say, you know, your friend John passes away, and like you're at the funeral, he's in the casket. There's John. He's like, no, John's gone, but his body's still there. Like his brain, which most people could like, you know, think it's the mind too, but it's those two things are different as well. But anyway, the spirit is gone. Like who he really is gone. So we are spirit, we are not the body, we are not the mind. And so therefore surrender comes from understanding and knowing who you really are as that spiritual being. And then when you do realize who you really are, at least in my experience, is you start to detach and not uh and not get caught up in the thinking again that you're the anxiety or you're the overthinking or the thoughts. Because
Mm,
again, once you think you are that, then you're there. It's like what you believe becomes true. But when you can separate that, then you can look at the anxiety and look at the overthinking and not get so emotionally involved in it where you can't change it. And
yeah.
so that's kind of like where the surrender comes in. It's like, I like, this is like, it's happening. It is what it is right now. And I'm going to let go or release the need to be, for it to be a different way right now. Because,
Yeah.
Chris, I want you to speak of your experience because I know, because, if y'all don't know yet, but we are brothers. So I've known you for my whole life. Um, and you've struggled with anxiety. So what I was describing, does that fit with like how you've really changed your life around that? Because I know you used to suffer from it a lot and now not so much anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna like bring up that a good exercise that I've done in the past and that I still do when I forget that, like, that there's a separation between who I actually am and the thoughts that I'm currently having.
Mm,
Like, you can literally just take a minute. It's not like you can call it meditating, whatever, but you can sit and kind of let the thoughts run through your mind and then ask yourself, who's listening? Like,
mm,
who's responding to those thoughts that I'm having in my head? Like who's listening to the dialogue? And that's the real you.
mm,
It's the thing that's above the thoughts you're having and the things you're thinking about. Or even people right now, if you're listening to this podcast, like, who's it that's like listening and responding to like this podcast, or
mm,
like the thoughts that you're having about this podcast?
mm-hmm,
So, and I know that's like very difficult in certain moments, especially when you're feeling extreme anxiety. So, I mean, I've given this tip in the past before, but like, if you're in moments of like extreme anxiety where, and I've been in moments like this where you just can't think yourself out of it, it's like impossible. And like in those instances, it's really important to change your state physically,
mm,
because the mind and the body are connected, and then the body and the mind are connected. Like, there's that interplay that happens between them. And so when you move your body, whether it's taking a walk or, doing some jumping jacks, or if you like to dance, kind of just dancing in your room, you change your state physically, and that helps change your state mentally. Like, there's
mm,
literally even times where, like, I've been like super anxious and even like on the borderline being depressed. And I've been like sitting in my room for hours. But then right when I leave my room, it changes. It's like
mm.
the environment too has a big play in it. So that'd be my advice if you're in like extreme anxiety, is like change your environment, or like move, like change the state of your body. And then that'll help, change the state of your mind too and your thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um,
That's great.
yeah, no, then yeah, it's a really good tip for anyone
Yeah.
who's struggling. Yeah.
Yeah, and particularly, I'm gonna just touch on like what's happening right now with like the whole coronavirus and
Mm,
that, I mean, because that for sure is bringing up some anxiety and overthinking for people. And so, number one, remember what Chris just said. It's my advice is that tool I've used in my life as well, and you've helped me out too. Like, sometimes I overthink, and I'm just sitting at my desk at my office, and like I need to get up and move and get out walking or dance. Like, I like to dance, or play with my cat Autumn. I do something different just to change the state
mhm,
of being. And so, especially with what's going on right now, again, anxiety and overthinking can be very prevalent, but using that as a tool, and then, separating your mind and who you really are, your thoughts and who you really are, is important as well, so that you can stay informed, but not let it affect you. Because there's a great quote by Eleanor Roosevelt who says, all the water in the world cannot get inside of me, or all the water in the world cannot drown me
mhm.
unless it gets inside of me. There we go.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like, the information around us in our circumstances can be what it is, but it's another part of surrender, right? It's like surrendering to it, like being like, for what it is, like for what's happening in the world. Like, of course, taking precautions, doing what you can to stay safe and healthy. And it's what you can do is also control is I was about to say control your mind, but because we're talking about surrender, is surrendering to what is right now and doing what
Mhm.
you can do. So
Yeah.
it's, all these aspects of what we can do.
Yeah, and dude, we talk about awareness on this podcast a lot too, because I
Mm,
really think that's a huge key. And like, just touching back to the very beginning of the podcast of that idea about control,
mm,
like, it's really important to be aware that humans love to be in control, because then sometimes these thoughts of anxiety, you can explain them away. It's like, oh shit, like I'm feeling anxious right now about this whole thing that's going on with the coronavirus because I want to be in control and I'm not in control. And there's no way that I can be in control of the situation right now.
Mm,
So it's all about like the locus of control, which is where you place your control. Is it inside of you or is it outside of you?
mm,
So when you're hearing all this news about stuff that's going on, if you're trying to change the way that the situation is, or if like let's say your governor says you have to stay in your house and you're like, oh damn, like I don't want to do that, like
like what's happening in New
yeah,
York right
yeah,
now.
exactly. um you need to figure out what you have control over and then work to change the things along those lines, because
Hmm.
like then you won't drive yourself crazy. But if you try to change things that you don't have control over, that's when like you can create more anxiety for yourself, because those things can't be changed. So
Ever.
what I like to say is like you were saying, Kev, like prepare, and this goes for anything, not just coronavirus stuff. Like prepare yourself for like what you think is going to happen in the moment and what you can control, and then adjust as the situation changes. Like that's all you
Mm,
can really do.
hmm.
Um, and again, like that's like my best advice for that.
Yeah, and one final thing that I add onto the back of that, on top like what you just shared, is to remember your source. Remember God. Remember the infinite intelligence that is working in life right now, because there is literally just one life, one presence, one power, one energy that has given all of us life. And yes, there are challenges. That's life. There are always challenges. No matter what's going on, there's always going to be something that we would prefer to not be happening.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean to say that God, that power, is not here in this situation right now, because there's an opportunity here. There's a
Right.
great quote by Henry, not Henry Ford, Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. He says that every adversity has within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, but that seed must be found, planted, and nurtured. And so
Yeah.
that's just the ultimate truth. We live in the land of polarity, meaning that there's good, there's bad, there's hot, there's cold, there's up, there's down. There are good times and there are bad times. But we get to choose the meaning of that. So if we
Hmm.
choose like, oh, this is bad, and this is not good, like I don't have opportunity, like I'm just quarantined, like, and again, beyond this situation too, it's just like if you're looking at your life right now as like, I don't have um, like opportunity or options, then that's what it will be for you. But as you open up to the possibilities, that's like, and you're choosing to say, to think, okay, I may be thinking, my thinking may be wrong right now, or it's not giving me expansion. So I'm going to think in alignment with possibilities. And guess what? This infinite energy will respond to you.
Hmm.
It's now proven in quantum physics that what you decide, or what you put your focus on, where you put your attention, that is where you're going to see more of that energy. So if you put
Yeah.
your attention on good things, about possibility, about love, about growth and moving forward, then your ideas will come to you, opportunities will present themselves, and you will be aware of more what you can do. But
Yeah.
so you got to switch, you got to change your thought process. And again, we've been talking about, what we've been talking about is how you do that. But just always remember that no matter what challenge you're facing, is that there is one thing happening, and that is infinite intelligence.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially about like where you place your attention and what you focus on. Because I just wanted to bring up the fact too that because I've been watching a lot of the news this week,
Mm,
and like if you're not, again, if you're not aware of that, like the situation or like what you can do with your mind sometimes,
mm,
like, and I'm not saying that the news stations have a specific agenda. Like sometimes I do, but I don't want to make this political.
mm,
But um like fear, that stuff sells way more sometimes than positivity, because it activates specific parts of our like reptilian brain where we're
mm.
forced to pay attention to it because we think it's part of our survival.
Yeah.
So that's like very important to understand too. And I've seen some people like posting this on Facebook, which is actually really dope. Like 10 positive things that are happening, like,
Nice.
throughout this stuff. And it goes back to that point where it's like if you search for things, like you'll find them. So
Yep.
if you need like a break from all this stuff, like search like positive news or stuff that's happening. It's out there. It's just
Yep.
sometimes like the major places you're getting news don't want to share that.
Yeah.
No, but I actually wanted to say, which is kind of cool because because of all this that's happening, like when China was in their lockdown because of this, like the pollution levels went down like crazy. The sky started to get clear in China and everything, and in Italy, because Italy, like, I mean, God bless everything that's happening over there, because it's, it's getting pretty bad. But
Yeah.
like the water in Venice is like clear now, and like ducks and like all this wildlife is starting to come back into that area now, because like there's no ships, like none of that stuff. So it's just kind of interesting how, like, I don't think we've ever talked about it on this podcast, but the idea of like the earth is alive, like the earth
Mm,
has its own, agenda, and it's a being, let's say,
yeah.
and has energy.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people are like saying like, oh, like maybe, this is happening because the earth like needs a break from, whatever's happening. And I don't know, it's just like another interesting perspective to look at. And there's just other perspectives out there about what's going on. But I think, like, I like yours, which I think encompasses all these, which is the
Yep.
only thing that's ever happening is infinite intelligence.
Yes.
And, if you're religious, or you can always like tie that to religion too, like the only thing that's ever happening right now is God, or, whatever. And if you really do have faith, you can surrender to that too, and be like, everything's going to be fine no matter what
Mhm.
happens. Like, this is for the ultimate good if you look at it for that way.
Yeah.
And then again, like in all this adversity, try to find opportunities for growth and opportunities to, better yourself and stuff. So
Yeah. One final thing I want to add about that, of what you just shared, is that, as a caveat, is, as you keep in mind the thought that there's one thing happening and it's infinite intelligence, that doesn't mean to say that you could just, sit back and relax, like everything's gonna be fine. I could do nothing. I could, be, negative. I could think whatever, like, after that thought. It's like, if I affirm once, like, I'm fine. That's not the truth. Once you accept that idea that there's one thing happening, it's infinite intelligence, and that the universe, God, source, spirit, is guiding this whole process, then you must act in alignment with that. You must think in alignment with that, and must act in alignment with that, for that to come to pass. Because the universe reads our intention by where we place our attention. And so that attention must be tuned to that greater expansion that you do want to see, and that is available to you. And it has to be repetitive. It has
mm,
to continue. It's not just one and done and things are going to be fine. Like, we are co-creators in this process. So that, looping back to anxiety and overthinking, like, that's we're creating our own inner world first, and then that influences, not controls, but influences the external world and the environment around us. So
yeah,
it's super important to remember.
nice.
Yup. That's all I have to say, and
Yeah,
share.
yeah. No, I think that was great.
Sweet. Okay. Well, yeah. I hope this episode has helped. And we'll talk with you on another episode. And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton.
And at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.